Greetings, subscribers, haters, trolls, and tropers. I'm Mario Potter, and welcome back to Let's Play Arcangle. We're moving on to Mission 3, the Internet Infestation. Because Area Z2 has been infested by an organic virus. Essentially, this level kicks the difficulty up even a bit more by throwing in a bit more complicated enemies, and it's a pretty nice level, I'd say. It's one of my least favorites in the game, but it's still pretty good. It's been contaminated by organic-like enemies, and enemies here will actually deal collision damage, which is a bit of a big deal, considering most of the enemies don't otherwise. There's little arrows telling you where these things come in, which is really nice in the developer, but they swarm the whole screen, they follow after you, they're essentially a big pain in my opinion, and they move a bit too fast. They move faster than you do, which is a bit of a pain considering they mostly chase you around, and they come in huge swarms. If there's ever a re-release of this, I'd like it so they're either a bit slower or don't come in quite such large groups. Because oftentimes there's not very many good ways to deal with them, especially when they swarm these and the cells that do at the same time. Fortunately, the cells distract the larvae, or the sperm if you want to be really juvenile about it. See, when there's only one of them, they aren't so bad. Except for the fact they follow you like friggin' dogs, and their bullets are quite hard to counter. Maybe if they fired weaker shots, but really just weakening them in one specific way would make it so much easier. But enough of that. Now moving on to more cells, who really aren't too hard despite there being a whole lot of them, and they keep dividing. They really aren't that hard compared to the previous couple waves because they don't home in on you and move it faster than you can move. It'd be nice if there was a super speed option which lets you move twice as fast in this game. Like the opposite of precision mode, that would be nice. And guess what? Everyone's favorite friend, more of these things. Oh, crap ton more. It's pretty much impossible to avoid dying a couple of times. Either that or it requires a lot more skill than I know how. These raptor flies shoot out large spirals of red bullets, which are a pain to dodge because you even need precision mode. Or some really mad skills because they also send these larvae at you at the same time. Which is really friggin' nice. Ultimately, the things that kill me in this game really don't seem to be very fair, but it's still a quite enjoyable game because it's possible to get through without too much effort with the number of lives you can get, so you can set the lives up to 20. Most of the deaths I seem to get seem to be quite either very stupid on my part or very unfair on the game developer's part. It's still definitely a fun game because you can just set the lives to 20 and breeze through it though. These parasites are actually pretty easy compared to other enemies because you just need to shoot down their spores and dodge their lasers, which is actually quite a bit easier than it looks because you can counter the lasers quite easily because they're quite weak. It's time for a sub-boss, Biocardiac, who's actually the main boss of the area at the same time. There were originally going to be two sub-bosses, Sod and Gom, two giant worms which you have to fight at the same time, but they were cancelled due to development constraints because this is a student project and it had to be released on time. You know, stupid stuff like that. And so we also have the same dude as both the mid-boss and the main boss, but he has different attack patterns, and he doesn't have these little arm things during the main boss fight. So I guess it's not all bad, I just would have liked to have seen the original two sub-bosses. That would have been pretty cool. Ultimately, it's not too hard of a sub-boss, especially compared to the annoying enemies you just had to fight. You just need to time where you move at the right time. So he's off to do more pleasurable stuff or something. Now here's the Queen Parasite, one of the is level standard big enemy, who fires strings of tentacle things that fire also a crap ton of bullets, and I probably should have used precision mode right there in hindsight. It also spawns parasites and shoots very large parasite spores at you. Moving up the camera corner was probably a very smart idea. Ultimately, there's like a food chain of enemies here, so basically the parasite spores are eaten by cells, which are in turn eaten by larvae, which in turn are eaten by raptor flies. This level isn't horizontally scrolling, it moves into the background, which is actually pretty interesting, and scrolls upwards at certain points. These enemies just do a couple shoots into the foreground, and then they start just spamming all sorts of red bullets at you. Precision mode would be a lot more helpful if the precision sequences weren't placed at the same time as, bullets which you have to move at high speed to dodge. For instance, right here, you need to be in high speed to dodge certain bullets, but you also need to be precision to weave throughout those huge screens there. I know you're supposed to be able to toggle it on and off perfectly, but it's a bit difficult. Now, the incoming swarm here is very easy as long as you spam your mouse back and forth. You can pretty much counter them quite easily, which just shows the effectiveness of your angle of light more than anything else. Speaking of which, this game actually has pretty good sound effects. They definitely make you feel like you're, doing damage and destroying enemies, and a couple of them even sound like meme lasers, or that sort of thing, like shoot-to-whoop laser when the enemy fires out a large laser. Pretty much anything else, like countering bullets, those dinging noises are pretty nice too, and so are the sounds of enemies blowing up. That's always very satisfying. Ultimately, the sound effects are sort of low. Well, there's not a terrible large amount of them, but all of them are satisfying and not terribly annoying. But enough about the dry, boring stuff. Let's talk a bit about the boss fight. This boss fight's music's okay, I just never really find it very memorable. Most of this game's music's pretty good, most of it's just not very memorable. Here, in this first phase, it shoots out a ton of junior rapid flies. You just need to swing your angle back and forth quite quickly and stay in the corner. I stay on the side because I'm a rebel against authority and goof around. Then it shoots out a very large pattern of lasers and tentacles and that sort of thing, which actually is causing my computer to slow down. You don't usually move this slow. And then it fires out a bunch of Salviates, which then explode and shoot bullets at you. Then it starts spawning these larvae things again, which is quite possibly the most annoying part of the boss fight because it spawns so many of them. It takes some pretty darn trickier maneuvers to avoid these things, just like earlier, and ultimately makes this boss such a big pain, because when they charge at you like jerks. And then there's this section with these red spheres, and then there's those yellow ones that home in on you without giving you enough room to dodge. That's also quite a bit of a big pain, because oftentimes you're backed into a corner by the red shots and you don't have really room to get out of the way safely. And so you just die again and again and again. And after that point it repeats the pattern, but it just repeats the same attacks over and over again. It's not a very complicated boss, but those two patterns near the end, I just die on them over and over again because I'm not sure if it's something I'm missing or if I just don't have enough skill. Probably the latter. Because I don't really claim to myself to be very good at this game. And I did get a couple of game overs. But ultimately I still think this is quite fun because I can do it. I can beat it with the 20 life section. And you've also got the bombs. The bombs are very, very useful. But sometimes it seems like there's nothing I can do but die because my brain just shuts down. That attack requires a lot of precision, and I don't mean just using precision mode, I mean you've got to switch between modes perfectly if you want to make it out, because they come at you with literally leaving you hardly anything to dodge, and you're very likely just to run into something else after dodging something in the first place. And that's why this is the first boss which literally, makes you want to smash your keyboard and hurl your mouse against the wall and that sort of thing, even though you're not likely to get a game over because you can get 20 lives, but it's ultimately frustrating. There is plenty of fair difficulty in this game, but there's also a lot of frustrating difficulty in this game. So yeah, I guess you could say it's quite a bit like a classic shoot-'em-up. After 2 complete runs through that pattern, the boss will try to escape and start using this pattern where it fires shots into the foreground and follows after you with these big crosshairs. This is actually easier than before, as long as you don't do anything stupid and run into the bullets like I just did there. It's pretty simplistic, and you can in fact actually defeat the boss before it even gets to this point, but I didn't do so, and I guess it's probably better I did, because this means I get to show off all the boss's patterns and stuff. The real tricky part is trying to move around the sides of the screen and not getting a bullet spawned right into your face from the foreground, because they don't get shot, those tentacle things get spawned. That's annoying. The big shots are no big deal to dodge at all, even with their spreads, but the homing ones can get you in the face because you're busy moving around the outside to avoid the homing background shots. Ultimately, this game's got some pretty good design, and it's very well designed to make you lose a lot of lives in a lot of different situations. I would have lost never life there, but fortunately you're invincible after beating the boss. So that's pretty much the big difficulty spike of this game, from going from pretty challenging and a bit annoying to just plain to either completely manageable or cheap and sort of I'm sort of a bit of a pain. This game actually does pull a lot of cheap moves on you, but in spite of that, or maybe even because of that, it's pretty darn fun. I still like it anyway, because it's got good design in pretty much any other way. I don't have enough credits to get revenge, so I decided not to buy anything this time.